Wonderful. Great. Well, welcome everyone. It's March and this is a fun and kind of special month for me. I've had a lot of time with Janet Moczulewski, who is a CFO and a therapist, and a beautiful, fun, interesting combination. We talk a lot about people stuff, and we're going to get some time with her today. I'm going to introduce her in just a moment, and we've got some business owners on the live session with us today as well. This is really going to be a chance to talk with somebody about relationship systems at work. You know, what I have found as a small business owner and then coaching and training business owners throughout the country all these years is that we get a lot of training around the business stuff. You know, we get some training on how to write a business plan. We get some training on marketing strategies. We get a lot of training on sales and some of the business components of running a small business, but we don't get a lot of training and development around the people stuff. The psychology of people, right? And this is the stuff that I find keeps us up at night. This is the stuff that can drive us crazy because we all want to be great leaders. We want to be good at inspiring our people. And I don't even know if we recognize some of the functioning things and dysfunction that we can create, you know, as a business owner. As individuals. So when I crossed paths again with Janet after many years of not seeing her and discovered that we were speaking a lot of the same language, Janet has been a CPA for 25 years, and she went on to get her master's in psychology, and she's been doing therapy work with couples and individuals, and most recently even a heightened interest in business owners and the team dynamics and organizational systems. And she's got a big keynote she's speaking at later this month, so we're kind of getting her right before she gets in front of this next big group. And what I want to focus on with Janet today is this whole concept of anxiety in the workplace. And sitting down with Janet, she said something that really blew my mind. As we were talking about anxiety and stress and the pressure, especially in a sales-oriented small business, which, you know, you all are in, we were talking about anxiety, how it can show up and how it isn't always such a bad thing. And when she said that to me, I just kind of fell off the edge of my chair. I was a little fascinated by that comment because I was like, what are you talking about, right? Don't we do everything we can to prevent anxiety in the workplace and calm things down and calm people down? And so the conversation went in lots of different directions, and that's what we're going to focus on today. And Janet and I go back personally as well. I knew her years ago. We were neighbors, and the one thing that always stood out for me was Janet's compassion for people. And she has such a calm demeanor about her. When I speak to her, I actually calm down because of the way and it made me realize too, as a leader, the way we approach our people, the way we talk to them, the tone of voice that we use, all this stuff really can impact others and in every relationship. So I learned a lot talking with Janet. I continue to learn a lot, and this month it's all about sharing that with you. So on that note, Janet's got a practice in Issaquah, Washington, just outside of Seattle. She works with individuals. She works with relationship systems at home and relationship systems in the workplace and leaders. So Janet, I just want to thank you for joining us today and hand the floor over to you and say a couple of words to help us kind of get launched into this, you know, what might feel like a heavy conversation.
Yeah, it could be heavy, but it also is, I've kind of seen it as kind of fun. But it is something that kept me up at night when I've been working with business owners and in the CFO positions I've been in. So I did go back to school and try to figure out how to work with people a little bit differently. But what we've talked about is that, you know, anxiety is not necessarily bad. I've read that that if you find an organization where there's no anxiety in the organization, it's probably going to fail. Because that anxiety is where we are setting goals and trying to meet them, or setting standards and kind of sitting outside of our box, you know, and that's where we're growing. And so without any kind of that, you know, anxiety going on, it's probably in this place where we're not really growing that much. So, yeah, anxiety can be good, But there's a big but here, and that is that we get into some of these anxiety responses and anxiety behaviors that build these dysfunctional patterns in our organizations and really can slow us down and stop us up and not, so we don't reach our goals.
And one of the things that we talked about, and I want to dig into today, is your conversation around being a resilient leader. I'd like to talk a little bit about what it is to be a resilient leader. How do we become more resilient leaders, and how does this kind of tie into this thought and belief around the relationship system having anxiety and what that means. So I want us to kind of get to that point, today. And maybe I'll just start by asking you a few questions. And what I really would love for today to be is for you all to have a chance to ask your questions of Janet as it relates to relationship systems. How can we get ahead of some of this stuff? How can we notice when the dysfunction is there and what to do about it? We talked a little bit last time around high-performing team members and low-performing team members, and how that in itself can create manifest into something that's very dysfunctional as well. Just because someone's a high performer doesn't mean that's all good, right? What do we do about that? And maybe helping me define what that really looks like. So let's just start with, how do these problematic things show up at work, and when can we notice that the anxiety is there? And Janet, what do we do about it? Maybe just kind of some fundamental things that you're learning and that might help us from a starting point. What does that mean to have anxiety in the workplace, and how do we recognize when it's happening?
Yeah, that's a good question. And then also, when does it go bad? When does it not for us, right? So we talked about this idea of a system, an anxiety, emotional system. I think we talked about it, and it's usually something that's a little bit below the surface and outside of our awareness. We are really aware of the numbers and the goals and the accountability and the skills and abilities that everybody has. But right below the surface is that, and we call that the rational system. Something we can see, it's right there in front of us, and we talk about it a lot. But right below the surface is the emotional system, and that's where everybody's interacting based on these automatic responses that they might have from their own emotional system. So this anxiety is built up, and then we respond in a way that we have, learned over time is our go-to. Whether we, push harder, or we back off completely, or, there's a lot of different ways that we respond to our emotional anxiety. So as we respond, we're affecting other people's response, other people's anxiety response. And then those match together, and we create these dysfunctional patterns. And it's the dysfunctional patterns that get kind of ingrained in your organization that then are how you all work, and it's hard to get out of.
Would you say that actually can impact the culture of a business?
Absolutely.
I'm imagining we co-create that, right? And depending on the players on the team, we have our own way of handling stress, anxiety, pressure as an individual and the leader of our team. And we probably bring that from where we come from and our family systems growing up and the relationships we've been in leading up to this point. And some people avoid it altogether, and some people go right into it. And so I'm guessing we co-create that.
Absolutely. And that's what we mean by calling it a system. It's not, you can't really point to one person, oh my goodness, they're the problem.
Yeah.
And you can't really take it on, you're not outside of it. So it's all connected. I like to compare it to like an old watch. If you take the back off an old watch, then you see all the gears and they're all working together. And it's going at 1 second at a time, right? And you can actually take the smallest gear and speed it up, and you get the whole system speeded up. And you can actually do the opposite, and you can slow down the whole system. So you as an individual, and especially a leader, can impact the system at the highest level and have the most impact by causing more anxiety or actually calming the whole system down.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So accountability, right? Just always comes back to that word. What are some things we can do as leaders to get ahead of it? How do we know when it's present, and then how do we get ahead of it or manage it better? Because I think we often get in a reactive state as leaders. We react to the stuff that's going on around us, and sort of in role model fashion, everybody else starts to get into that reactive status. I feel like we set the tone, right?
We do. We set the tone, and we push. We push harder, right? We get anxious, and we end up pushing harder. So the first step is, and this is the hardest one, is to start paying attention to how we react to our own anxiety. And when we walk into a room and there's anxiousness going on, what do we do? And paying attention to that automatic response that we do when we encounter our own anxiety. And becoming aware of your own anxiety is actually pretty darn hard, but it's about paying attention over time and watching what happens in your system, what happens at home with your spouse and your family, what happens with your coworkers and your managers that you're trying to inspire and motivate. So that's the first step, is trying to figure out your own. And be aware of that system and see in that system.
And how do we recognize when it's there? I mean, is it always obvious? I feel like when a sales organization, it's you're chasing numbers, you're chasing results, you're chasing production, and the pressure's on. And the closer we get to the end of the month, the pressure can grow. And pretty soon there's a pressure cooker. And pretty soon I don't even want to go there today because I'm going to be all stressed out the minute I walk in the door. And it's like this thing that just sort of snowballs sometimes. So are there some indicators that help us to identify that it's brewing? And I mean, there's obvious signs of, I suppose, people are on edge and people get cranky, whatever, but how do you recognize that you've got a system with that kind of dysfunction and the anxiety is pretty present or looming?
Yeah, well, we are wired to notice. That's our brains are actually wired to pick up on this kind of stuff. I mean, we're designed to really be collective people, and we connect with other people. So we're wired to know if people are feeling good about what they're doing or they're struggling. And so I think we all can kind of know when our spouse is a little upset, or the person who's really close to us, and we can see it in the workplace too. But when we're looking at ourselves, it's frustration and anxiety and worry and going home and thinking about this all day long. It's all these things that we do, but sometimes we actually kind of pride ourselves on this is hard work, but sometimes it's overwork. We're feeling anxious about things because and so we go home and we can't stop thinking about it. So it's overthinking. It's getting frustrated with our coworkers when they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. That frustration is a sign of our anxiety response.
Gotcha. So there's a line there. And I feel like that when we were talking before, you were explaining how there's a point where anxiety is actually a catalyst for good things. There's a point in time when the anxiety edge can actually be productive. And like you said, if there's no anxiety in the workplace, it's probably bound to fail. And then you cross over into that dark place. So before we get to the dark place, talk to us about what you meant when you said sometimes anxiety is a good thing, and what kind of things do we watch for there?
Wow, that's a hard one. I'm still trying to figure it out for myself. So, yeah.
We were talking about production and sales, and how if there isn't a little bit of anxiety, that sometimes that leads to results. And if we don't have a little bit of that pressure there to help us and be a catalyst, we may never get there. So you said a couple of things that just really grabbed me. And I thought, what an interesting way to look at anxiety and stress in the workplace. And maybe it's just reframing how we view it.
Yes, but also taking it as part of the equation. And that's, I think, what is often not done is that we're focusing on the rational system, right? All of the skills and abilities and accountabilities, and we just have to tell people more what they need to do, right? And then they'll do it. But if we're still not getting those results, then there's probably something else going on. So that's becoming aware of this emotional system that's going on. When you push harder on this particular person, they actually shut down. And so you might have to react differently to that type of that individual.
Yes. So how do we recover, and how do we kind of hit a reset button? Many of us may be reactive in the workplace. Many of us may have a team member who's particularly reactive in the workplace. And I have seen both ends of the spectrum where one person can ignite a fire and inspire people and push them onto that next level really positively. I've also seen that anxiety carry on like wildfire, like an infection that spreads through the office, right? I mean, there is a tipping point there. So what kinds of things could we do as leaders to maybe hit a reset button and be aware of it and maybe get ahead of it?
What I found is the reset button is a pause. And what you'll see in these very inspiring people versus the ones that feel like they're just like out of control, it's that pause. It's that thought that goes into what they're trying to do rather than just a automatic reaction. And it's that pause that says, okay, take a moment. What are you going to do here? And I'm going to choose what I'm going to do here rather than just do something automatic that I've, done every time. Mm-hmm. So it's actually coming back to figuring out what's going on with you and taking that pause and maybe a couple breaths and then moving forward based on what you want to do and what you want to accomplish, and having that ability to think through it. This anxiety response, this automatic response, is split second. So oftentimes we don't think about what we're doing. Mm-hmm. But if we take a pause, we might make a different decision.
Is it something as simple as showing up in the workplace and noticing it and calling it the way you see it? I mean, is it something as simple as saying, can I hold space for all of us for just a moment? I can feel it in the air. I mean, I've been in situations, I remember running my agency and having team members, and I remember moments when I'd walk in the office and you could slice a freaking knife through the air and feel the tension or the stress or the attitude, and it sucked because this is my business. I don't want to not enjoy going to work every day. I mean, it was so frustrating for me. And there were moments when I just wanted to lock myself in the office, just hope it would go away by the time I came out. And then there were other moments. I had a really vulnerable moment one time when I literally broke down and I sat there, everybody's butt down in a chair, and I said, we need to figure some stuff out. I'm going across the street to have a coffee. When I get back, I need you both to communicate with me. Tell me what's going on. So what can we do? And is it that simple to find the courage and be the leader to call it when we see it? And how do we manage it with a little grace?
Yeah, that is what you did, and going across the street and having a cup of coffee was your way of deciding, okay, I'm going to take a moment and recover here. And, maybe not as gracefully as you'd like, but recover with grace is our goal. And when we come into a room and you can, slice the tension with a knife, then that's when you just say, hey, I know we're all stressed. Let's just take a moment. Let's take a breath. And I think it's a leaderly thing to do when you show people that you can do that in this group situation, and then it's okay. It's okay to be stressed out. but it's also okay to take a moment and recover. And help everyone else to recover too.
Yeah. Is this resonating with you guys? I'm seeing people shaking their head. Mark and Jill joined us too. I can't see you, but I know you're there. So, and one more question I want to ask you, and then I want to open it up to the group, because I really want them to ask you some questions and enjoy this time with you. High performers versus low performers, and sort of the self-fulfilling prophecy and the cycle that we get into sometimes by shining the light on the glory person who, seems to be always carrying the load for everybody else. I always looked at that as, and I have to say, we have team members sometimes where we tiptoe around that person because they're so good at producing things. They're so productive. They're so highly functioning from our perspective, high performers, that we sort of let them do whatever, and everybody kind of gets shifted off to the side. But when you and I were talking, I was interviewing you before, you were saying, well, that right there is dysfunction in and of itself. And it was a really major shift for me in how I really looked at that high performer versus low performer mentality that we kind of get into sometimes. So could you talk to us about that?
Sure. This is the way I phrase it is over-functioning and under-functioning. And this is one of those behavior patterns that can come into your organization and also be kind of a cultural sticking point. So a lot of times you'll see that person who just takes on all this work. They're the volunteer, they're the one who never says no, and they're the one who also can be really sometimes difficult to work with because they're putting down other people around them. They're not doing their job, so I have to do it. They're complainers. Sometimes they're even resentful. And sometimes they don't get their own work done. These are over-functioners. And typically there's an under-functioning nearby. There's an under-functioning person who, in their anxiety response, is to shut down a bit when somebody's like pushing. So they shut down, and then the over-functioner points to them and says, oh, well, see, this is why I have to do it, because it wouldn't get done otherwise. So the over-functioner justifies their over-functioning behavior, and then the under-functioner says, oh, well, see, they're going to do it anyway, so I shouldn't even bother. So then you get this pattern, and we oftentimes look at that over-functioner and say, or the under-functioner and say, oh, they're not doing enough, so let's get rid of them. But what happens when you have these dysfunctional patterns, you end up finding that over-functioner finds another under-functioner. There's another, and the pattern continues around, when you get rid of one, then there becomes another. But you don't ever get rid of the over-functioner, because they seem like if we get rid of that person, the work won't get done. But oftentimes, that over-functioner, and I have to say, I am one of those who tends toward over-functioning. And really the only way to get those people around you to function at a higher level, if you're an over-functioner, is to step back and get out of their way. So I'm guilty of over-functioning, and when I notice that I have somebody not stepping up, not taking initiative, not being brave enough to just go for something, then I realize, okay, this is the moment I need to step back. Mm-hmm. I've been over-functioning for them, and that's why they're under-functioning.
Well, and this is, to me, you talk about team, right? I mean, if you're going to be a high-performing team member, and as I'm listening to you talk, I'm reflecting on my relationship systems at home. I'm thinking about how we probably do this in our personal lives as well, right? Yep. And if we want someone to step up, we need to step back. But it's the EQ. It's this emotional intelligence. It's this understanding that you are causing some of the dysfunction. And I suppose what happens next is that person becomes a martyr, right? Like they've created and manifested this role, and they do it at work too. And I've had these little, these little things go off talking with you, because it's like these relationship systems happen at work too. And there is that person who takes everything on and then blames everybody for not doing anything. And they take everything on and they like being the glory person, and they're getting all the, the light shine on them. But at the same time, what I'm hearing you say is in a small business team, that person needs to have the wherewithal and acumen to know that it's their responsibility to help bring other people along so the team can be successful, so the team can win. And maybe that's the difference between an independent or an individual contributor versus a team player.
Yeah.
And we have to be really clear about where we're putting our incentive programs, where we're putting emphasis on. Is this a team of people and we're all pulling together for the same end result? Or are we each individual contributors? And so that emphasis needs to be on the individual. And there's a difference, isn't there?
Absolutely. Yep. And it's where what you measure becomes more and more important. Whether you're measuring, having a balance between that individual performance and the team performance.
Yeah.
You measure just the individual, you'll end up having that overfunctioners.
So one of the things I'm learning from you is that, and as I coach and work with other business teams, is that this is one of the major team building components, that if you have someone on the team where things come effortlessly, if they instinctively are good at the work that they do, if they navigate through things with ease, we really need them to partner with us in a leadership role to help bring others along. Like maybe it doesn't even matter what their job title is or how long they've been there, right? That if we notice these, to me, leadership attributes about someone, how I'm noticing right now in this moment, I actually need to step back and let the other person step forward. That's like, that leans more to that emotional intelligence of high performance. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that we consider that enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Any thoughts from you all on this? Anybody want to jump in or make a comment, or is this resonating for you guys?
Thank you.
I want to check in with Theresa. I'm going to try to unmute you here. Is this resonating with you? And I'm calling out Theresa, and I hope it's okay, because we had a coaching session this week. We're talking about kind of hitting the reset button a little bit with team members and going through some transition with team right now. So what's showing up for you?
I can't believe you unmuted me. No pressure. No pressure.
I unmuted you.
Actually, when I heard this, as far as the over-functioning, under-functioning, I think that I might be a little contributor to the problem, being kind of tending towards that over-functioning piece, which I've never heard it described that way before. But I took a ton of notes just in the last few minutes because I immediately thought of myself. And I know there may be team members that have had this happen, but they're probably following my example. And if they tend to be an overfunctioner by nature, then this me being one also doesn't help curb the problem. So what I wrote down specifically is that if I'm overfunctioning, then I'm not allowing the underfunctioners to come up. I'm just repeatedly fixing things and doing things and probably getting a little frustrated in the meantime.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. And then the language we've often used in the coaching process is, holding our team members creative, resourceful, and whole. And, that's CTI language. It's my Coaches Training Institute, learnings. But holding our people creative, resourceful, and whole is one thing. There's another dimension to this of us realizing, am I co-creating some of this dysfunction? Am I making some of these things happen? And maybe I'm doing this in other areas of my life too. So awesome. Thank you for sharing. How about for you, Mark? What's showing up for you over there?
It just goes back to me a little bit. I read Patrick Lencioni quite a bit on the 5 dysfunctions of a team.
Yeah.
And, just I had to step back a little bit, and there has to be a level of trust between team, so that you can create that open environment to have those conflicts that are healthy. where you're vulnerable as a leader and you have open permission to talk to team about things, so if there's that healthy level of trust, that you can address some of these things. If somebody comes in frustrated or they're blaming others, to have that healthy conflict, saying, "Hey, Paul, what's going on today?" So
Yeah.
and to mine for that, what's behind it, and they know that you have your their best interest in the heart of the team, and having that ongoing permission to do things, and then because you're all committed to moving this thing forward, and we spend more time together than we were with our families usually.
Yeah.
So I think,
and I'm glad you bring up the trust piece. I think that's it's great that you mentioned that, and it takes time, doesn't it, to build that? And maybe part of it is trusting, and the resourcefulness and trusting that our team members, we hired them in the first place, right? There's a reason, and giving them a chance to help solve some of these problems and talking about this. That right there, probably is going to build trust. That you can walk in the room and say, things feel really tense right now. I feel like everybody's a little under pressure right now. And could we just take a moment? Like, I loved your language, Janet. Could we just take a moment? Like, it's just honoring the system by doing that, isn't it?
I think it's also and I like how you said that builds trust. If you show yourself as less than the one who knows everything and the one who's in control all the time, if you can show your vulnerability, then that's actually trust building and gives everybody else permission to be less than perfect or less than, on all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's probably the thing we do most as business owners and team leaders, is somewhere along the way we formed this opinion or belief that we need to let everybody know that we have it all figured out. I got it all figured out, and in fact, we never have it all figured out. I mean, I don't think we ever stop, striving to have it all figured out. And that vulnerability is hard for some of us. I mean, again, do we learn this stuff in our families growing up? I mean, Janet, you see this crossover of the family relationship systems that you counsel in your therapy practice, and then these business owners, and we're kind of the same person, aren't we? It's not like we cross this threshold of our workplace and become somebody different.
Yeah, we don't. We learn these things early on. You can kind of look at the family where one kid is the one who's spoken out, and maybe he's the oldest, and he battles his parents, right? And then the next kid down the line, he may see that and say, I don't want to get in these battles, and become the one who kind of is quiet and shuts down. So you then you have the potential overfunctioner, underfunctioner right there in that one family. One takes on all the battles of everything, and one kind of shuts down and backs away from anything that looks like a confrontation. So that serves them well in that situation. But we bring those skills as adults and use the same skills that we learned as children and think that they continue to serve us well. And sometimes they do, but sometimes these are skills now that we need to kind of try and unlearn. We don't need to walk away from every confrontation, and we don't have to fight everything that we don't see as perfect.
And damn, don't we wish we would have learned this stuff before we signed up to be business owners and manage people? I mean, this is it. I had a client say to me one time, we get so much training and support around the business stuff, and like I was saying earlier, but nobody teaches us about this people stuff. I mean, it's complex, and we're human beings, and if we don't have it, we should have all gotten our master's degree in psychology, right? If we were going to run small businesses that have employees. I mean, this is the stuff where we seem to get stuck more than any place else. One of the things that you talked about with me was becoming a resilient leader. What does it mean to be a resilient leader, and what are some steps that we can take to become one?
Resilient leader. I've looked up resiliency, and it resonates for me, because what it is it means recovering from negative conditions. And I put in there recovering with grace from these negative things that happen to us, and looking at it's really building ourselves in our mind, body, and spirit to be bringing our best selves to our groups, whether it's our relationships, whether it's our coworkers or families. So resiliency is learning how to take our own anxiety and calm it down, and be able to take the moment and take a pause, and then be intentional when we interact. And so I think it's a lifelong learning process. Mm-hmm. So, resiliency is being able to have these things come at you, and then staying steadfast in your goals and keep moving forward without regard to these negative conditions or roadblocks.
Yeah, and it's not easy to do. I feel like this resiliency piece, and again, in every area of our lives, is being adaptable. It's knowing things are going to feel and look messy sometimes, but being able to bounce out of it and probably quickly. I like the word grace because we often are really messy. And I'm someone who can be very reactive in the moment to whatever situation I'm in. And, I've always called that passion. I'm a passionate person, but it doesn't serve me really well sometimes. It sort of backfires on me once in a while. So, so the steps I'm hearing you say are recognizing it. What kind of things can I do to calm myself down first? Like, that's my first priority, right?
Yeah.
And then stepping into it when I'm in relationship, at work, at home, in any situation.
Yeah. So yes, become aware of this emotional system that's going on, and recognize that this is actually happening, whether you're aware of it or not. And then start to focus on what your own anxiety response is, and how this automatic reaction to whether it's something your coworker says or something your spouse says or a child says, and then taking that moment, calming yourself, taking a breath, taking a moment, just actually not responding right away gives you that moment of pause, and will help from that. It'll stop you doing the automatic response.
Yes.
So yeah, I could go on to examples, but I think we take too much of your time. I'd love to hear your questions too.
So I'm gonna open this up to the group so you can field some of their questions. You guys be thinking about what you want to ask Janet. And while I'm doing that, while you're doing that, what I'm hearing you say too is, and I wrote this down, it isn't so much about changing other people. It's about changing our response to people and understanding how these complex issues that trigger anxiety and impact our team's effectiveness in the workplace is really our responsibility. Like, it all starts right here. And that's another dimension for me that is real important for all of us to hear when we're running families, when we're running businesses, when we're running, organizations, because it's really easy for us to blame one isolated individual for the dysfunction, isn't it?
Yep. And if you want to look at the example of a family, you have sometimes one kid who is the troublemaker. And families look at this troublemaker as the kid that needs to be fixed. This kid needs to go to therapy. This kid needs to, go into some kind of training or something. That kid is the problem. And if that kid were fixed, our family would be perfect. Well, what we know about systems is that kid, or it could be one employee, that kid is just the symptom bearer of the entire family. The system is out of whack, and that kid is the one who bears the symptoms. And if you actually work with the family to reduce some of the anxiety and the dysfunctional organization of the family, then that kid may become less symptomatic without any direct treatment for themselves. That's how powerful this is. And that, you know, so the way you said it, Theresa, was that we now have all the responsibility because we're the leaders. But also, I look at it the opposite way, and that we have so much power to calm our organizations and hate to use the word fix, but really we can manage this. Any individual can manage this, and us as leaders can manage it with more influence just because we're in that power position. But we are empowered rather than, you know, the buck stops here and it's our fault. We're empowered to make these changes because we can.
Yeah.
Because it's a system.
Well, and it makes sense why one individual who is the problem in an organization gets coaching and support and therapy, whatever it is that they might need, but the system doesn't change. The problems are still there.
Yep.
And I don't know that I've ever looked at it in that respect for a team. You get one problem team member. This is a team sport running a business, right? And so it really, sometimes there is an isolated issue that needs to be fixed, right?
Sometimes, yeah.
But what I'm hearing you say is that it's generally much more complex than that. And it actually is up to the entire team or the entire group to work on that together because of the interpersonal dynamics that are happening there. Yeah. Ah. Okay. So what questions do you have for Janet? Yeah, I'm like, where do I begin? So what questions do you have for Janet? What kinds of things could you ask her in these final moments that we have? And what's showing up for you right now in this conversation?
I was just thinking on team, anytime we invite somebody new to the office, you know, some, you know, preemptive questions like, do you have this all together? I mean, how do you know that there's not drama that they're going to drag in from outside? You know, because in an interview, they always come in, you know, and sometimes taking tests and things all look good. But then the next day or the next week, you notice things right away. And I mean, I want to get specific, but you know a little bit, Theresa, that it wasn't a good fit. And how do you preempt that? That, you know, we've got our culture and this is what we do. But if it's, you adopt a child, I mean, I like to go all in, but how, and then the team says, wow, that was, you know, they're good, they're not here. How do you do that?
Yeah, that is really tough. And with this system theory, you bring somebody into an organization and they come into the organization, and either the organization changes them and they kind of fit, or they change the organization and they kind of fit. So as you were bringing this person in and you realized fairly quickly they didn't fit, there could have been, you know, maybe there was things you can do to get them to fit, but it may have been a long, arduous, and painful process. And really you had to let them go and not affect your whole organization by their influence. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I don't know how to preempt and know whether they're going to fit unless you get more into psychological questions of so what do you do when you're most anxious? What do you normally do? You know, in a really uncomfortable situation, what's your go-to? I don't know if they would be even honest in that situation, but
right, they probably wouldn't say Jack and Coke or something.
I keep a bottle of wine in my desk. That's what I do. You know what shows up for me when you listening to the both of you? It's I do this exercise with my clients, and I'm remembering why I started doing this in the first place. Was creating a culture statement for your business. Mm-hmm. You know, what do we stand for? What are our values? What are our beliefs? Like, to me, that culture statement that you co-create with your teams, and I insist that the team members are involved in that exercise because everybody's voice needs to show up. That's one. Do you feel like that could be something that you can use, Mark, and maybe putting a lot of emphasis on in the early stages of the conversation as you're getting to know someone? This is what we stand for. This is who we are. These are the values and beliefs of our business. How do you see yourself fitting into that system?
And we did use that extensively, and that made the decision very easy.
Mm-hmm.
And I got praise from my office manager, who's my better half, that's the best decision, the quickest you've ever made, and for the benefit of the team, because there was just a lot of emotional baggage outside of work that just was hanging with, and he proved it on his way out the door. And but over the years, we've invited many, many people, and I've held on to them too long, different times, I think that culture statement is very true, that this is who we are, and with reliability means something to us, not just to our customers, it's to our other team members. You have to be present to, when you have to be part of the family to make an impact.
Yeah.
That one word, reliability, was a missing link by far.
Yeah. Well, and asking questions in your interviews about how do you manage stress? How do you, juggle multiple priorities with pending deadlines? And, have you been in an environment, or have you been in situations? I suppose there are questions around that, Janet, where we can open up the conversation. We are a production organization. We are under pressure sometimes to create results, produce results, and hit the number, whatever that might be. And for some people, that's super exciting and big turn on, and it's going to be fun at work. And I love deadlines. I love a great challenge. And there are others who will avoid it. And it might not be because of an attitude problem. It might simply be the family culture, what they've learned and how they handle anxiety in their lives. And we can try to be something we're not in the workplace, but we all know what happens when we do that, right?
Well, and if you were going to ask them that question, what do you do when you don't hit your targets and you don't hit your goals, and your boss is, trying to push you harder? What is your response to that? And they say, oh, I just work harder, or I just push, more, or I just, whatever. You can kind of look at those answers in a different way and say, okay, is this going to be productive? Maybe the right answer for your particular culture is, well, I kind of step back and I say, okay, who can help me learn something different to really achieve those goals? Maybe that's the answer that you want to hear. Kind of look at, oh, I work harder, maybe isn't the answer we want to hear in a team organization.
Yeah. Oh, this is good stuff. What else? What other questions you all have for Janet? Everybody's writing furious notes.
Well, looking through them.
I guess something, when you recognize that somebody, I'm just going back a little bit, just between us pausing and thinking through and being calm. I guess the opposite's true. How do you introduce anxiety in a good way through accountability? If there's they're not worried about deadlines, they're not worried about goals, how do you do the opposite and create positive anxiety? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think this comes back to the rational system we're talking about. It's usually pretty darn good at creating anxiety and creating that, okay, this is your goal. you didn't meet it. And
yeah, I'm talking on the emotional side, the wanting to make the team look good. You know, if somebody's natural tendencies to retreat, how do you encourage, like, the push a little bit hard, that balance?
got it. Yeah. You talked about a book, which I'm going to pick up now, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, but it made me think of another book that I'm reading right now. It's called Smart Leaders, Smarter Teams. And it talks about the difference between a leader who needs to know all the answers versus a leader who asks most of the questions, and that curiosity. And that's where you bring out a team member who doesn't really engage quite as much. They step back, and that you keep asking questions because you're bringing them into the conversation rather than pushing a conversation on them. Mm. So it's a difference of pulling versus pushing, I guess, too. But that a leader of curiosity rather than the leader of knowing all the answers, because we don't.
And I guess I would say that may point back to values as well. Having great curiosity about what's going on with someone, because what do? I mean, Mark, we do this all the time, right? We start judging. What's wrong with that person? Why aren't they motivated to do these things? And we start making up our own story about that person, right? And we all know where that gets us. Like, that's just, don't waste any more of your mental energy. So I like that you bring that up, Janet. It's a reminder that when we don't know or we're curious about something, and we see that motivation isn't there, being curious and having the courage to ask those questions and call out someone on what you notice or don't notice. If it's really obvious that someone retreats and pulls away and isn't striving in any way when everyone else on the team is, it's like one of these things is not like the other. You kind of go back to that whole, what's different here? And they may just not fit. But before we make that decision, I suppose it's asking the questions, right, Janet? Like leaning into it and going, this is interesting. What's showing up for you? And
like realizing that we do have a story, right?
Yeah.
And it may not be very accurate.
Yeah.
Bringing in that curiosity to really understand what's going on with this.
Yeah. I'd say 9.5 out of 10 times when I make up someone else's story, I'm wrong. Maybe there's that little sliver once in a while, but yeah. Yeah, these emotional systems at work are real. And what I guess I just appreciate so much about the conversations I've had with you, Janet, and bringing this to, my circle, is that we need to be thinking about this stuff. We need to be building this into development initiatives of our team, because there's too much at stake not doing it. And I've seen us all spend a lot of years, minutes, months, break it down, to time, maybe wasted, missed opportunities to create a more healthier environment in the workplace. And we just don't know how. It doesn't occur to us sometimes how to approach it.
Yeah.
What other final questions or thoughts? Hi, Mark. I just want to get your voice in the room if he's still there.
Hi.
Hi, Mark. How are you doing? What's showing up for you? We can't see you, but I can hear you. What's showing up for you? Hi, there he is. There's his handsome face. What's showing up for you in this conversation today?
Well, I came in a little late, but the one that I was right at the beginning about anxiety and stepping back after, because one thing that I get, I guess it's anxiety, but sometimes I feel like it's like, when is this all going to start crumbling? Like, is this things are going well, and then all of a sudden it's like, I don't understand how this is happening sometimes. Or when is everyone going to just either policyholders are going to cancel or everyone's going to leave? It's just, it's kind of maybe a self-confidence, but it's also like I get anxious and then I go to bed and I'm like, okay, I feel better now. Now I'm fine. It's like taking that break maybe, or leaving early and doing something outside, or just getting outside the office by myself, away from my family, just a few hours, and then it's like, okay, I'm all right now. And then back to it. I don't know. I think that's partly, that's the hard part. Luckily, the team aspect right now is pretty solid. But again, I'm just waiting for some drama to hit, and it's going to kind of come back to me. But I think the pause is important, because it's like it can be very lonely at times.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's lonely at the top. That's where that saying came from. It can feel very isolating. And what I'm hearing you say, Mark, is the whole in the moments when things are clicking and people are doing what they're supposed to do, there's a part of you still that's going, what's wrong? There's nothing wrong. You're looking for what's wrong, because everything feels right today, and then tomorrow might be completely different. And again, we're dealing with human beings, and every day is a new day, and it's very complex. And we're a product of where we come from and our lives, and we all have these dynamic lives with multiple people intertwined in it outside of the workplace. And so then we all come together, and I've tried to find it, but there's just no switch that I believe we can turn on. And is that the right thing to do? You turn the switch off and on when you show up for work. We are who we are. And maybe what I'm learning and listening to you, Janet, talk about this and addressing Mark's comment is that just the heightened awareness of knowing that we are a system at work. We are a relationship system at work. And some days just feel lighter than others because of the circumstances. And enjoy it when we feel it, but acknowledge it and be grateful for it, and be prepared that things might look and feel different tomorrow. And that's okay, because we're a relationship system.
Yeah. Well, and there are also joy and comforts and those kinds of feelings. Those are actually probably the most scariest, because people are afraid they're going to stop. So if things are going really well, it's sometimes more fear inducing than when things are struggling and you're fighting. So yeah, great job, Mark, if things are going really well. And I think enjoy it for now, and also trust that you're really good at dealing with them when things fall apart. I think you're a couple hours outside of the office and away from family, and having those moments to yourself is part of what we were talking about with regard to being resilient, is feeding that part of yourself that needs to be recharged, and doing that for your family and for your organization. And essentially it's for yourself, but it makes you have something to give when you show up back at work and back home.
Yeah. Well, and I'll give some kind of public acknowledgement to you, Mark. Working with your team members, I've gotten to know Mark and his team. I've been on site with the whole team. I'm doing some one-on-one coaching with one of his team members, and the feedback that I get from his team is that he is phenomenal at holding his team resourceful. He doesn't ever pretend or act like he's got it all figured out. He is fascinatingly curious about them, and he cares about them. He cares about their well-being. And that right there, you talked earlier, Mark, about trust, building, the other Mark talking about trust and how do you build trust in an organization. And I think that's a really great place to begin, is even in the messiest of times, that they're resourceful to figure things out, and you're there to help guide them through it, right? And you're not there to fix it. And you're beginning to see all the investment that you've put of time and effort into building relationships in your organization, Mark, and that's what's showing up for you. And so, yeah, enjoy it. Things are just fine, and when you're not there, I've been talking to them, when you're not there, things are fine, and that they know they own it. And I think when our team members know they own their jobs and they own their place there, and it's up to them to fix it, make it better, whatever that might be, and appreciate it that they do. It's the resourcefulness piece and the leadership dimension, Janet, that I heard you talk about earlier. Oh, this is good stuff. Well, as always, I enjoy my time with you, Janet. I so appreciate your wisdom and your words and your sort of calming effect on us in our quest to be great leaders and run high-performing teams. Is there anything anyone wants to add before we close out our call today?
Just thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks for having me. This was great. It was fun.
Good. So Janet's got a big keynote later this month, the presentation she's going to be giving, and I will make sure that everybody has access to her on my site. I know you've got some new content that you're developing on your website as well, specifically for business owners and teams. And so thank you for putting that out into the world. And thank you all for showing up. Here's to being a resilient leader and realizing that that journey is just going to keep on going as long as we have our door open, on at our office. I think this is something we'll continue to learn and refine as we go. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks.
Theresa.
Thank you.